Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Austin Seminary. My name is Sean Watkins, and I have the gift and privilege of serving as Associate Dean for Lifelong Learning. It's a nice way of saying continuing education. When folks graduate and realize the nation and the world are nuts, how do you lead and serve in diverse communities that do not agree and are very polarized in our time? I want to welcome you both to our campus. I want to welcome you to this event, the cross and the olive tree. I'm supposed to get up and give opening remarks, and I am trying not to cry. My mother was born in 1944. She passed away on March 19th of this year. She was 80 years old. My mother was born in 1944. My father was born in 1948. I was born in 1982. I am the first person in my immediate family to be born with full rights as an American citizen. As a descendant of enslaved peoples, I know what it is like to not have your voices be heard or believed or recognized. History tells us this. The present tells us this. It's been one of the growing issues of my own personal life. It's the reason why I got a bachelor's in African American Studies and History across the street at UT. And I've tried to do this work to elevate every voice at the multi-ethnic and multicultural table, every place that I go. 11 years ago, I had the distinct privilege of meeting James Cone as a seminary student at a seminary that shall remain nameless. I emailed him to talk about a Black theology of liberation and ultimately one of his last works, The Cross and the Lynching Tree, where he took a historical event and he paired it to the reality of the unarmed shootings of Black people in the United States of America to tell our story in a way that could not be ignored. The world has not paid attention to Palestinian voices for some time, especially the events that have taken place recently in the last 2 years. And we have a moral and ethical, for those of us who call ourselves Christians, hopefully the good ones, not the crazy ones, we have a theological responsibility to believe in the bodies of people, not our politics, not our ethics, not how we vote, but ultimately, am I serving the bodies of people? And if bodies are harmed, then there is something wrong with how I think, how I lead, how I serve, and how I love. And so it is a gift and a privilege for my department, the Center for Lifelong Learning, along with the incredible Reverend Dr. Crystal Silva McCormick, Osama Malik, there's a dear brother and friend, and this institution overall, to welcome you to this campus. It is a much needed, not conversation, but call to do justice with each other. And so I hope a number of you feel seen and heard and honored tonight. Welcome to this space. It is a joy to have you with us. We're glad you're here. I'm going to turn it over to Addie, who has got some announcements to share as well. Welcome to Austin Seminary. Thanks for joining us.
Hello. My name's Addie. I work with FOSNA, who's sponsoring this tour. So I want to give you a little bit of information about FOSNA and also ask if you'll help support the tour. You can decide the way that you're supporting it as you showed up in this room. So snap for yourself, please. Thank you for showing up. Are we a snapping crowd? We are now. I'm so glad you're here. This room gives us joy. And we have been in 6 cities. This is our 15th event of 17. And we are so grateful to be with you, especially in a seminary campus. I want to tell you a little bit about FOSNA. I'm going to pass around some things. FOSNA is in relationship with Sabeel Liberation Theology Center in Jerusalem. FOSNA stands for Friends of Sabeel North America. So we try to be friends to liberation theologians in Jerusalem. One way of doing that is taking these 2 young men on a tour all across the country and having them be uncles to my kid. So that's the way that we believe we're going to get out of this, right? The only way out is together. Yes. We want to be friends to you in the movement. We want to resource you. FOSNA is a national organization that organizes Christians around Palestine. So I invite you to learn more in the flyer. I'm going to send 2 resources around that have QR codes. One is if you're feeling super resourced, we would love it if you helped us sponsor this tour. We had pad thai today, we've had coffee, we had barbecue, first barbecue for these guys. And if you want to help us pay for that, that would be so great. Also, if you are interested in buying their book, you can purchase it through the QR code and then get one in the back. We're going to do amazing things tonight. I love the idea that we're beginning with music, and I think I'm going to turn it over to you. Does that sound right, Crystal? I'm actually turning it over to someone else who's coming up here. Thank you. Can we snap? Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Seri Andoni, and I'm the musical director of Viva Palestina Orchestra. We're about to play some music for you. But Crystal asked me to introduce the band first and tell you more about us. So we are collective musicians from Austin, and we got together around November 2023, after the genocide has started in Palestine. And we got together, we said we need to do something. We are musicians, we need to have our voice heard, we need to play Palestinian music, and we need to bring it to the Austin music scene. And we had our first show maybe in early 2024, and it was a huge success. It was so many people that a lot of them, the venue couldn't fit everybody, that people had to turn away. And eventually we started playing shows almost every month, doing fundraisers for Palestine every time we can. And the music that we play is, we focus on resistance music that Palestinians have used throughout the centuries and throughout the last 100 years, especially, to resist occupation, to call for freedom, and to give people hope that freedom will eventually prevail for Palestine. And last thing I want to say, please follow us on social media. We're called Viva Palestina Orchestra. You can find us on YouTube, on Instagram, etc. And more recently, KUT just published a story about us, and then NPR picked it up, showing our effort in raising money in the Austin music scene. In the last 2 years, we raised around $100,000 together with everybody, with the community of Austin. So we're gonna play some music for you today. It's mostly gonna be in Arabic, but the theme is gonna be resistance, freedom, and fighting for freedom. Thank you.
Thank you. A round of applause. Thank you again to the incredible Viva Viva Palestina Orchestra. A heartfelt thank you to the orchestra for bringing your culture, your land, your art as resistance, and a gift to our Palestinian friends who are going to present about their book. So thank you so much. Again, we are so grateful. I want to say, friends, that we're going to transition now to hear from theologians John and Samuel Munayir, who are going to share with us about the book that they are authors and editors in, and share about what is behind the book and their theology. And so it's a gift as well to have this music and to have our Palestinian friends who are incredible theologians be with us and speak with us today. So please don't go anywhere. We're going to transition to put some chairs on the stage so that you can see them and hear from them. And we'll do a Q&A after they also present a little bit, and you will have the opportunity to also ask questions. So a thank you to you all for being here as well. We are deeply grateful for your presence in this space, and those of you online as well. Thank you so much. I'm sorry. My name is Crystal. I work here. I totally forgot to tell you that. I'm director of Latinx Studies, and I teach missions and evangelism, and just grateful that you're here, and I'm grateful to be here. I do that backwards.
She's modest. This is Reverend Dr. Crystal Silva McCormick. She is a professor of mission and evangelism and the director of Latinx Studies and Programs at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary. And she is the strength and the arms behind this event tonight. She's the person that came in my office and said, Sean, we're doing this. And I said, yes, ma'am, we are. So that's Reverend Crystal McCormick.
First, a big thank you to Viva Palestina. They may try to spoil our event and our time together, but we keep on singing. So thank you, Viva Palestina. Thank you, Austin Seminary, Crystal, Adi, Fazna, the people online also that are helping. Thank you very much for you guys also for taking your time to be with John and I. It's a huge honor to be here and to share our work together. Just so you know, I am the younger brother. Can you hear me? The online people?
I messed up your joke.
It should be good.
Yeah.
They can't hear you on Zoom.
Try now.
Zoom, can you hear me? Let's see. Testing. Well, no, they can't hear us. Just so you know how you know I am the younger brother to John. You can tell by the progress of our balding. So it's 4 years between John and I, and in 4 years' time, I might be in the same homeland. Just keep that there. John and I are coming from Jerusalem, and we're at the end part of our tour. We started in Chicago. We went to New York, New Jersey, DC, and now we're in Austin. And I would say this is it's the coolest event that we've been with the music of Viva Palestina. And it's been a wonderful time in Austin with Crystal and other friends. I think we'll just get started and we're good. So I'll hand it over to John. Oh yeah. We are coming in time of mixed emotions with the ceasefire. We are relieved that the bombs are stopping and there's a bit of quiet in Gaza. Our friends and family and people that we know in Gaza are having some relief, and now there can be talks about bringing humanitarian aid and hopes for rebuilding Gaza. But at the same time, we don't understand really what this ceasefire deal is. It's such a weird thing that suddenly happened all of a sudden. And we are afraid that the genocide may continue. So we are in a deep sense of anxiety, relief, pain, and also a member of our own community, the Palestinian Christian community in the West Bank. Layan Nasser has been in prison, sent to the occupation jails for 8 months. So we're coming with you with all of this emotion and with this context. And I think precisely because there's a ceasefire, I'm afraid that Palestine and the movement for Palestine will dwindle down. And we shouldn't be a movement of reactions, but a movement that is strong and sustained. So it's all the more reason that it's important to speak about this book and speak about Palestine in general during this period. And I'm really grateful, and I think it's poignant that we're presenting the book during Indigenous Day today. So we're bringing our Palestinian indigeneity today in conversation. So again, pleasure to be with you.
So on the day of the ceasefire, another thing happened in Palestine, and that is that we had our first rain. And when we have the first rain in Palestine, that tells us that it's time to pick olives. It's the beginning of the olive harvest season in Palestine. And me and Sam and our family every year during this season, so we're going to do it when we go back, we go to the olive groves and we pick olives in order to make our delicious olives using our grandmother's recipe for the whole year. But on one occasion, when me and Sam were kids, we went to the olive groves that the Israeli army government confiscated from our family. So we snuck in and we were picking the olives. And our grandfather came to sort of join us. And he was a bit too old to help us, but he sort of started touching the trees and he started telling us the story of how he lost that land and how a soldier kicked him out of his home, him and his whole family, and forced him out. And that he said to the soldier, I'm just going to pray one last time in our ancestral church. And he took the whole family, they went to the church, and they didn't leave the church. Yeah. And that's how we managed to stay in the city of Elit, for those who are familiar. But why do I bring this story? Because in that storytelling, our grandfather helped us connect to the land, to our ancestors and family, and also to our indigenous Christianity by staying in the church. And this is what we seek to sort of introduce you today through the book, but we want to situate it within sort of the broader historical and political and cultural landscape of Palestinian Christians' response to settler colonialism. So we will speak about the book. We want you to get you a bit more context. And then we'll dive into the... Well, you're good. Yeah?
Yeah. I'm going to share it for the people online.
Gotcha. So we will speak about the context, the theology, and then some of the new developments in light of the genocide. And that's when we'll bring into conversation the actual book. Perfect. So just a bit of context, because I don't know who's familiar and who's not familiar with Palestinians and the Nakba and Palestinian Christians. But Palestinian Christians are around 160 to 180,000 people. So we're a very small community. And out of those Christians, the majority of us are Eastern Christians. So again, I don't know where you come from in the US, but if you've heard of the Greek Orthodox Church or the Greek Catholic Church, this is where the majority of Christians come from. And unfortunately, in the 1900s, Christians in general in Palestine, we were about 16%. And in Jerusalem, we were 20%. But today across Palestine, we are less than 2%. And I'll speak about why that is, and you probably already know. This is our family. So you can see here the church on the right-hand side. That's the church that our family hid during the Nakba. And you can see, well, it's kind of blocking it a bit, but the fellow in the middle, the second one, who's a bit balding, right? You said we're talking about balding. That's our grandfather, right? That's our grandfather, Jacob. And it's a Greek Orthodox family. Again, it's a bit far away for you, but you can see the Greek Orthodox priest. This is the family that we come from. This is our heritage as Palestinian Christians. But as I already mentioned, in 1948, with the Nakba, the catastrophe, where 750 Palestinians became refugees. Half of the villages and towns in Palestine were completely destroyed. This shook the entire Palestinian population. But it also shook, just like our Muslim brothers and sisters, the Christian population. And this is sort of the seeds of how Palestinian Christians started to develop Palestinian theology and a Palestinian liberation theology. And this is a picture of our grandmother. And our grandmother and grandfather, they were the first Christian wedding after the Nakba in the city of Elil. And this is a picture that we have, which kind of symbolizes the trauma that the community had to go through. They continued with life, getting married, but are deeply, deeply traumatized. And I think this picture really summarizes it really well. So if 1948 was the beginning of how Palestinian Christians were starting to articulate a Palestinian liberation theology, it was in 1967 with the Nakba, or the Six-Day War, where Israel occupied the West Bank and Gaza until today, where the urgency for Palestinian Christians to develop a Palestinian liberation theology intensified. And this is also because many Christians and Jews started to interpret the events, both 1948 and 1967, with religious language. They started saying that this is part of God's divine plan. It's a fulfillment of prophecy. So Palestinian Christians started to develop a response to a lot of these theologies and ideologies.
So as John mentioned, the Nakba was a complete upside down change of landscape within not only Palestine and the demography, but also within what we call the faith. So there was the Nakba faith, or the faith Nakba, that was articulated by Cedar Davis, the mother of Palestinian liberation theology. She said that Palestinian Christians not only endured a Nakba physically, but also one of the faith. And in the Nakba, there was an urgency to articulate the Palestinian theology, but really it was in the first Intifada that Palestinian theology and liberation theology burst into the scene. As you can see in this picture, the first Intifada was a grassroots movement where women, Christian, the working class were really involved. And also Palestinian theology was on the streets. Secondly, before the first Intifada in 1975, and with the Islamic Revolution in Iran, the civil war in Lebanon, and the Islamic Revolution in Iran, there was an urgency also to engage. This is a bit distracting, I have to say. Is this better like this? Okay, I'm gonna try. So there was a real necessity also to engage with Islam, and Palestinian theology was one that was engaging with Islam and the current realities in Palestine. And really in the first Intifada, this broke into the scene in international and local level. The leading figures of the movement. Thank you. You know when there's presentations and there's always someone breathing to the mic like this? I have a fear of that, so that's why the whole thing was so awkward. Okay, Palestinian theology. Let's get back. So, civil war in Lebanon, Islamic Revolution in Iran, the first Intifada broke into the scene. In Palestinian theology, we consider the pictures here the kind of first generation or pioneers of our movement. So you have Jiri Eskhoury, the founder of the Al-Liqa Center, that engaged Christianity and Islam in dialogue in Palestine. You also have the patriarch of the people, the patriarch of the Catholic Church in Jerusalem, Michel Sabah, who we call the patriarch of the people, where he symbolized the indigenization of clergy people in the church, where Palestinians were now the heads of churches and were in places of authority within the church. And also you had the kind of Protestant academic articulation of Palestinian theology, symbolized by the writings of Naim Atik, who wrote the foreword for this book, and Mitri Rahib. Naim Atik and Mitri Rahib really represented a form of Protestant pushback to the hermeneutics of Zionism, Jewish and Christian, which leads to the core theological positions of Palestinian theology. So Palestinian theology doesn't ask itself, does God exist? But asks itself, where are you, God? Wenak ya Allah? And in this point of departure and with this question, it tries to deal with the context of Palestine and with the faith Nakba that I mentioned earlier. The leading movement, so the leading pioneers of Palestinian theology at that time were refugees in 1948, and they experienced the Bible and Christianity as a tool of the oppressor. So they were trying to provide an alternative hermeneutic to the Christian faith and to the Bible, which makes the Bible not only meaningful to Palestinians, but also counters the colonial theologies that were so present in the West. And with that counter and with that hermeneutic, they also articulated an imperial theology. So it's linking Israel, of modern state Israel, with the Roman Empire. And in that sense, the West and Roman Empire are seen within Israel. That is the lens of imperial theology. And with that lens of imperial theology, they wanted to articulate a theology that is centered around Christ, because so much of the kind of evangelical Christian Zionist centering was on Israel, the state of Israel. And they said that is a wrong way of reading the Bible and understanding the Christian faith. We want to center it around Christ. So they saw Christ not only as a hermeneutic lens to doing theology, but also a blueprint in doing Palestinian resistance. So Christ, for the pioneers, was a blueprint to doing nonviolent resistance to the Roman occupation, as seen as a Palestinian that was crucified as a political rebel. And for those of you who are more interested in Palestinian theology or aware, the Kairos document that was written by Palestinian theologians and activists summarizes the kind of core theological positions of Palestinian theology. And you can read the document maybe in your own time, but this paragraph kind of really summarizes at that time what Palestinian theology is. But as John mentioned, Palestinian theology is, and Palestinian Christians are a minority in Palestine. And because Palestine was the events where Jesus and the Bible occurred, the context and the theology of Palestinian theology was extremely ecumenical and one that is engaging with Islam and Judaism. So those are kind of the core theological positions of Palestinian theology at that time and in that moment.
We began with the story of our grandfather who experienced the Nakba. Our generation are trying to wrestle with the genocide. And I think most of us here have seen some of the horrors that have come out of Gaza. Many of us have seen or have not seen the action taken by many Christians and churches. It hasn't been an adequate response. So the new generation of Palestinian Christian theologians are trying to wrestle with this question. And these are just some of the basics of this movement. They're beautiful people. If you're interested in more of their work, we're happy to connect you to them and to share their work. And many of these authors are in the book. So we're 8 contributors, 4 Palestinian men, 4 Palestinian women, trying to engage with the current reality of genocide through Palestinian Christian and theological lens. Now, Sam and I originally did not want to, this was not our project. We had a completely different project, but because of the genocide, we felt that we had to address this issue. And if I can summarize the book in 3 sort of core elements, because people here, the contributors are dealing with different topics that are connected to the genocide, but if I can summarize it in 3 sort of main elements that run through all the chapters. The first one is our audience. We are not writing to white Western evangelicals to stop being Christian Zionists. We are focusing on the movement, both in Palestine and outside of Palestine, that is trying to liberate Palestine. So the shift in this audience is not from focusing on some of these fundamentalist Christian Zionists, like a lot of our work has been done so far. We're trying to focus on the movement. Therefore, and this leads to the second point, we're trying to make these connections between our liberation struggles. So we have a chapter that engages with Black liberation theology and Palestinian liberation theology in dialogue with one another. We also have a chapter that looks at the genocide in Guatemala and the genocide in Palestine. And what are some of the links and how can we learn from one another? And we have a chapter that engages in indigenous theology, Turtle Island, with Palestinian liberation theology. How can we make these connections? How can we unite our struggles? Because our struggles are one. The same forces that are oppressing people of color in this country, or the poor in general in this country, regardless of color, are the same forces. And the final sort of element that runs through all these chapters are the sources we are using for constructing our theology. Oftentimes, if you want to write theology, you look to academic books and what sort of theologians have said and have written. Here, we're looking at the theology of the people, or the tree itself, the olive tree itself. So for instance, there's a chapter by one of the contributors who is from Gaza, and his family are still in Gaza as we speak. He looks at his grandma as a source of theology. And I'm sure many of you here can relate to how our family members or our grandparents have oftentimes shaped the way we live and think theologically. And there's a few more sort of interesting, we think, ways of doing theology, but I'll pass it on.
The cross and the olive tree. So why did we pick the name for this book? The cross symbolizes, the olive tree, symbolizes Palestine. The rootedness in the land, producing fruit irregardless of the weather conditions. But also not only the rootedness of the land, but the resilience it has. So the olive tree symbolizes us. It's seen as a spiritual being, and we identify ourselves through the olive trees. So that's the olive tree. The cross is the symbol of our faith. We are Palestinian Christians. So it symbolizes our belief, our community, our indigeneity, but also it symbolizes the crucified people of today, the Palestinian people and other oppressed people. So we're bringing the cross and we're bringing the olive tree in a way that dialogues with one another. That is to do a theology amid the time of genocide. And in the introduction of the book, we use olive oil to kind of reintroduce Palestinian theology, to ground it within our indigeneity. So first, we have the olive oil in the church. The picture, I don't know if it's so clear, but this symbolizes the theology that is represented and done by the clergy people. In the picture, this is the tomb of St. George, where John and I's ancestors built the church, and there's olive oil around the tomb. And people come to anoint people with the olive oil and bless themselves, but also farmers bring the olive oil that they harvest to get blessed, to get a blessing from the church to the olive oil, so it will be fruitful, it will be tasty and nourishing. So that's the olive oil in the church, and that represents the Palestinian clergy people who led the Palestinian movement and lead the Palestinian Christian movement in many ways in the church. And how the Palestinian people really understand theology from the pulpit. The second metaphor is olive oil soap. This represents kind of Palestinian Christian advocacy or Palestinian academic theology that is written mostly in English and is trying to counter the colonial theologies of Zionism in all its forms. And we use olive oil soap as a way to metaphor the cleansing effects that Palestinian academic theology and advocacy has from the toxins of colonial theology on our body. So this is academic Palestinian theology of the soap. And for those of you who know, Nablus is very famous for that production of soap. Lastly, and this is where we really think is overlooked by internationals, but also by Palestinians, is the olive oil that is in the lamp. So when you take olives and you get it pressed in the olive oil, in the olive press, there's an extract within the olive oil that is not fit for consumption. And it's used for fuel in the lamps that illuminate our homes in darkness. Today, we obviously use electricity, but back then it was lamps. This symbolizes the lived theology of the Palestinian people, the music, the harvest, the farmers, our grandmothers, the way we have hospitality, the way we eat. This is the theology of the people. And this theology is overlooked because a lot of times Palestinian theology is only focused in the soap form, in trying to criticize the West. But this theology is actually really essential because it sustains people in times of oppression and in times of genocide. This is what brings light and healing for us Palestinians. And we wanted to bring a more nuanced approach to Palestinian theology that is rooted within the olive tree and within olive oil. So we introduce the book within those forms to really try and situate the book within the historical trajectory of Palestinian theology, but really in our indigeneity. So that's how we try to situate our work and Palestinian theology generally.
So this book is written from a Palestinian Christian perspective, so it's relevant for those who are interested in how Palestinian Christians engage with the reality of genocide and settler colonialism. But it also invites people of other faiths and religions to engage and think how we can build our movement using theological language, but also really trying to empower and sustain the movement in its spirituality. So this is also true for anyone who is also an atheist or secular. We have to think about how we can engage with one another and sustain a movement that is in deep spirituality with one another. So we'll end now, and I think now we'll move to Q&A.
There it is. Sorry.
Thank you all so much for that introduction and, well, for teaching us. I wanted to ask just a few questions you could respond to, and then we're going to open it up to you all. One thing that I see in the book that I was wondering if you could speak to is that consistently there is the mention of land and faith together. And if you can also share with us about co-resistance, what you mean by that in the book. And then the last thing that I'll say, we can repeat, is what you have to say as Palestinian Christians to Muslim brothers and sisters. Okay, so first the land and faith.
Theology is done within a certain space and time, and it's done within a certain land. And John and I really wanted to situate the theology within land because we're doing it in a specific context. And doing theology ignoring the context is not relevant to the people. So that's why land is so important. But importantly, land in Palestine and the way we follow the land helps us understand the political solutions and the healing aspects of community. And that's why we wanted to give the imagery of the olive tree so that we are farmers in cultivating Palestinian theology that is organic to the landscape of Palestine, but also one that can lead us into a place of healing and political liberation. And that's why land is so important. And we learn from the land. So the olive tree teaches us how we must live. In Palestine, we eat seasonally. it changes how we interact with our communities. The way we press olives to make olive oil is done with neighbors. Some of the songs that were sung tonight and the Palestinian folklore is always used land as an image for what is hopeful, for what is painful. So that's why land is essential for us in doing Palestinian theology. And the issue is about land. So the way Zionism is treating the land and the way Palestinians are treating the land shows you that it expresses the settler colonial dynamic, and it shows you that the issue really is about land. So that's why it's so important. And when we were here driving with you in Austin, we also saw that the issue is about land. In Indigenous Day today, this is highlighted, but also in the gentrification of the cities. So for our theology to be relevant amid a time of oppression, amid a time of genocide, it has to be rooted in land.
As Sam said, the empire seeks to disrupt our relationship from one another, our relationship to the land, and our relationship to spirituality. Right? Think about some of the communities in your context, how capitalism and also racism seeks to disconnect between these different sort of elements. So when we do theology in relation to land, what we're trying to do is to go against those forces. So when we do theology or we try to live in a responsible way, we're trying to take steps that strengthen our relationship to one another, to the land, and the divine. And that can be very simple acts. It doesn't have to be books. It can be the way we cook together, right? The way we engage with music and so on and so forth.
Thank you. I want to just appreciate that, because often Western Christianity, be it Catholic, Protestant, in the US and just Western Christianities, often don't talk about relationship to the land or see it as spiritual. So it's almost a foreign concept in so many ways. So to bring that to us is very important, and to think for all of us how we are in relationship to the land, and instead of extracting from it or extracting labor from other people. Today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and so many people in the US often think that this is Columbus Day and that Columbus landed here, and they've never read his writings, which talk very awful about other human beings, and he represented Christianity for so many people and still does. And so we also have to counter these mythical narratives, right, and embrace what is true, and Indigenous people tend to bring that mirror to us, and so I appreciate that very much.
The first mandate that God gave to humanity was to be stewards of the earth. And that means taking care of the land. Jesus Christ, when he was resurrected, was identified as a gardener, trying to redeem the role of Adam in being a gardener. So if we garden well and eat well and treat land in a way that is fruitful, naturally the political landscape will transform. There will be no settlements because that ruins the land. There will be no checkpoints. There will be no uprooting of olive trees or bombing of a certain place to utter destruction. You know, one account of what the Israeli army was doing was spraying salt in the buffer zone in Gaza so that nothing can be fruitful and nothing can grow. If we learn how to treat land better, follow land, then naturally the political landscape will change. I'll answer maybe about co-resistance. In the chapter about co-resistance, the question is really, or the move in narration is, how can we move from this idea of coexistence that is often put in Palestine between Israelis and Palestinians, instead of trying to think about it as coexistence, the writer of that chapter is trying to move to co-resistance. So if you really want to engage in a way that is authentic, that is ethical, amid a time of genocide, expecting a Palestinian and Israeli to coexist is ridiculous. But having a place to co-resist together against Zionism is a place where there can be shared struggle and shared relationship.
I'll perhaps answer the third question about our Muslim brothers and sisters. We write in the book about how the olive tree and olive oil is also very important in the Quran and the Islamic tradition. So it speaks about how God's light is lit like an oil lamp that we just showed you. Or the Prophet Muhammad also speaks about how he instructs people to use the oil from the tree as a way to sort of cleanse themselves, and it comes from a blessed tree. So a lot of theology in Palestine, as Sam mentioned, because we're a small community and we live side by side, is often transcends religious boundaries. And we have different forms of living. Interreligious dialogue is a foreign concept to us. We have interreligious neighboring. And we use these types of religious connections, whether it be to trees and others, to really engage with one another in a healthier way. And also, if you look into Palestine's history, before the British Mandate and European colonialism and Zionism, you see how some of these communities really live side by side. Now, that is not to say that it was utopia and that every single relation between us now is utopia. But we are brothers and sisters in this movement and in this struggle, and we need to work together, not just Christians alone and Muslims alone, but we need to work together in order to achieve collective liberation for all people. And I'll just say another thing, that oftentimes the media likes to highlight Palestinian Christian oppression. But when it comes to Palestinian Muslims oppression, the media tends to ignore it completely. So about 2 months ago, the Holy Church, the Catholic Church in Gaza was bombed. And it reached nearly every single news source that I know. But there's been, I don't know how many mosques that have been completely bombed to bits in Palestine. So there's also, we have to be careful here when we engage, especially with Christian majority communities, not to reinforce Islamophobic tendencies by the West, where they prioritize Christian lives over Muslims' life. And I think it's particularly important now in the US when you see certain far-right movements suddenly caring about Palestine because of sort of an America first policy, and they see sort of the Christians as a way to convince other Americans, but still sort of demonizing and working within that white supremacist logic.
Okay. Thank you for that, for all of that wisdom, for teaching us and for reminding us about collective liberation, which is what I hear in the book consistently, rooting your surviving occupation and apartheid, and connecting that beyond your community, which is very powerful and very faithful, I would say. I was wondering two things. One more question about the book. But also, I was wondering if you could say, maybe if there's someone here or some friends here that don't understand the different strata that Palestinians live in across the Palestinian territories, the occupied territories, the West Bank, the differences that maybe I think the people I encounter often don't understand those differences. If you could just help our audience understand that a little.
So within the settler colonial dynamic or project of Zionism, there is a sort of pyramid or a ladder of privileges that Palestinians are ranked, or disprivileges. So you have Palestinians living in the West Bank that after 1967 were under military rule. You have the same with Gaza. You have Palestinians like John and I who have Israeli citizenships because our family managed to stay in the land, and we have certain rights that our Palestinian brothers and sisters in the West Bank don't have. And you also have Palestinians with East Jerusalem residency, who after 1967, eventually East Jerusalem was annexed by Israel. Jerusalem was annexed by Israel. So you have those kind of categories of legal rights that we have that is used to divide and rule us. You also have Palestinians in the diaspora, some of whom we've met today, from Haifa and Bet Sahur and Yafa, and they experience also the exile. You know, Edward Said articulates that experience of exile, but he says that all Palestinians experience a sense of exile. So while there is a hierarchy of certain rights that Palestinians are under, John and I are not from Gaza. We are not starving like our brothers and sisters in Gaza. We are all facing what is defined as the logic of elimination of settler colonialism, whether it be our identity, our own body.
Thank you so much. I was going to ask one more question from the book, and I'm looking at time, and I want to open it for you all to be able to have opportunity and some of our friends online. And thank you again for your wisdom, and I look forward to hearing more of your wisdom and responses to questions that our friends here have. So I want to open it up to anyone who wants to raise your hand to ask a question. Thank you, friend.
Yeah, I'm Reverend Dr. Thompson. I'm a physician consultant in global health. I am also an ordained minister of the gospel from the Pentecostal charismatic background. We've been working with Director General of the World Health Organization on the issues in Palestine. And I think with a ceasefire, we are going to do more. I want to thank you for the book. And to ask the cross and the olive tree. They talk about genocide and what it's going to take to bring about reconciliation and healing. Since basically we have that in the book, can you just talk a little bit on those two?
Thank you.
I'll just quickly say that the title is also a wink to the work of James Cone. James Cone wrote the book, The Cross and the Lynching Tree, where essentially you can only, he argues that you can really understand the cross of 2,000 years ago when you understand the crosses of today. And at least in this context here, some of the crosses were lynching victims. We play a slightly different kind of play on the words here, because the olive tree doesn't have that same symbol like the lynching tree, but it does symbolize Palestine in general. So it's bringing sort of the crucified people on the cross today with Palestine, if that makes sense. And I think some of you probably also read James Cone, so it might be of interest. In terms of reconciliation, as Sam mentioned, I think we're at a place where we have to first stop the genocide and focus on liberation, right, and justice for people who are being completely annihilated at the moment. Having said that, we should do it in a way that it doesn't simply change our position from oppressed to oppressor. We don't want to just change roles. We want to completely transform our relationship with one another and with the land and with the divine. So this is sort of the vision. So liberation and reconciliation go together, but we have to take liberation extremely seriously and end currently these structures that oppress and kill people.
Reconciliation is a loaded word, right? So at least in Palestine, it's a loaded word. And throughout our time here, there's been different reactions to the word reconciliation. What I would say in response to your question, as a doctor needs to accurately diagnose the sickness of the person in order to offer a appropriate remedy, appropriate medicine, we need to do the same in Palestine. So you need to really understand the settler colonial structure of Zionism that is in place on Palestine in order to correctly understand what are the solutions and the paths forward. Many people are trying to push reconciliation and use that word in an inappropriate way
because they seek to see the solutions that they want to happen in Palestine and misdiagnose the problem that Palestinians are facing. So we need to be very careful. That doesn't mean reconciliation is out of the table. It means that we need to know how to do reconciliation in appropriate manner in Palestine. And it doesn't begin with Gaza. It begins from the beginning of our settler colonization, which is, you can say, 1917, the Balfour Declaration, or the Nakba in 1948. So really, I would challenge and invite you to really take time to understand what we mean by seeing reconciliation in Palestine.
And I'll just quickly say that there's a chapter in the book engaging specifically that. So for those who are interested, you can get a copy.
Yeah, no, thank you for helping expand what we think of reconciliation and how that includes justice and liberation. Any other questions? Go one more.
Yeah, thanks for being here. There's an incredible parallel with Hawaii. Aloha Aina is their concept of living with the land. And when Zionism was coming into the fore in the 1890s in Europe and Austria, because of the pogroms in Russia and even before the Holocaust, we had Queen Lily in Hawaii being deposed illegally. We have an occupation in Hawaii as we have in Palestine, and we, the American people, have been suffering and paying for that, for those people in those places.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. Did you want to respond to that? Yes, yes.
Very quick. One of the contributors from the book, Azmera Hamuri Davis, lives in Hawaii. And we mention Hawaii. For each contributor, we mentioned the city that they're from to really show the locality of the book. And we mention Hawaii there. And the book looks at other places of colonialism because we need to also understand that there's an intersectional structure of oppression that we Palestinians are facing and other people are facing as well. So our vision of liberation needs to be one that is collective, one that we're holding one another. And this is where we're also challenging Palestinian theology. Palestinian theology with the early pioneers, as much as we are grateful for their work, they're continuously part of our work, their gaze was always to the West, always trying to do advocacy to the West. And that's important, but we're disproportionately focusing on advocacy to the West, not looking to the global South and not looking at other oppressed communities around the world in the global North as well. So we're trying to say there's places of not only critique of the empire, but healing with other contexts of oppression, other people who have faced genocide. And you bringing Hawaii is so important for us when we're talking about the cross and the olive tree, because we need to also look at land and parallels of the oppression in order to collectively liberate one another.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much. And thank you for raising that. I was sharing with John and Sam and Addie that we had an Indigenous speaker at the seminary a couple of years ago, Cheryl Bear, incredible Indigenous theologian from what is now known as Canada. And I introduced her by all of her accomplishments and degrees and things. And she said, thank you politely, and got to the podium and said, I'm Cheryl Bear and I come where you can hear the salmon in the river. You know, so naming the city where people are from, the land and where they come from is so important to Indigenous people, and what that teaches us is so important. So thank you for highlighting that and connecting with other oppressions. One more question, I think, from the audience, and then we'll turn to some of the Zoom questions. No, not right now. Okay, great.
I have a question. I think having been raised in the US, I often see this conflict, or I feel like I'm often told about what's happening in Palestine as one of victimhood. Either we hear about the Jews as being victims, Or when we finally get some information about Palestinians, it also portrays Palestinians as victims. And I just wondered if you could speak to that a little bit and how you see, how should we be looking at what's happening in Palestine right now and Palestinians?
Maybe we could take a couple of questions at a time.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I don't know you.
Know you either. Hi, Sam and Don. Thank you so much. I'm so intrigued and curious about like this next generation. I'll just talk really loud. I'm really inspired and curious about this. As a Latina myself, like looking to my ancestors and wanting to talk back to them. There's been awesome critique from like second and third generation Latinas about the way in which the preferential option for the poor has reinforced this idea of like the non-neutrality of God, which is beautiful that God stands on the side of the marginalized or the crucified. But then when we're risen up and God's on our side, and then God's on our side, so we get to champion or oppress another person, it can reverse that. So I'm curious, as next generation young Palestinian theologians, how you would respond to the challenges of globalism and migration with the movement of people and the landlessness of what it means to be our generation, that we move for jobs, that we move because of political situations. What are you all saying to us in global discourse about the way that movement and landlessness works? Like what's your religious imagination and the method of what you all are doing? What does it have to say to us about that?
One more question, then we'll go to John and Sam. Any other questions?
Hello, I'm a children and youth director. What would you have us tell the children?
Thank you for your questions. Hope people are okay remembering them.
I'll begin with the second question. The younger generation is critiquing the older generation in a sense. Again, we felt as though there's been a disproportionate focus to the West. It's ironic that I'm saying it's to a Western audience, so it's in the States. But the first book launch was in South Africa. And that was symbolic to where we're going. But also we need to recognize that there's issues of land globally, north, south, global north. The younger generation, in terms of reimagining and critiquing within the Palestinian liberation theology angle, is saying that when there's rooms of decision-making in Palestinian Christian movements specifically, it's usually only trained theologians and clergy people. Where are the farmers? Where are the poets? Where are the artists? Where are the children? We need to have a conversation that is more holistic. The table should be wider so that we can really emulate the cultivation of olives. That is where John and I first experienced kind of the identity formation of who we are, with our grandfather explaining to us the story in the olive grove. So the new generation is inviting a new way of doing theology. And in that way, we can reimagine, and we can cultivate that imagination. And this is a challenge, because if I'm always engaging with how people are reading the Bible in an oppressive way and always dealing with the oppressor, then I speak only in their framework, in their language. And my ability to reimagine starts becoming less and less. And that's why we want to shift the focus. Look at Guatemala. Look at Black liberation theology. Look at Latin American liberation theology. And really do theology not only in dialogue with them as theory, but do theology together. That's why this book is a collective. It's not a focus on individual spokespeople or celebrities. We're doing theology together as a movement. And I'll explain a short kind of anecdote from the process of writing the book. We gathered all the contributors together to speak about the book. and what each person will write. One of the stars of that meeting, one of the people that was most influential and was so strong in her words was Cedar, Auntie Cedar, who was the mother of Palestinian liberation theology. And that triggered Lama Mansour, one of the contributors of the book, to speak about something called Abwalita faith, the book about Abwalita faith. Yusuf Khoury from Gaza took that Abwalita faith book and concept and made Theta theology. Look what happened in just a 1-hour meeting of people together when we're not on stage, we're meeting together, engaging intergenerationally, and what kind of imagination sparked. That's the challenge the new generation are bringing, and that's our imagination.
About the victim question, I think it's really important to observe who is being called the victim and which suffering is being platformed. To give you an example, I've traveled a bit in Europe, and in Europe there's lots of museums for the Holocaust, which I think is very important. But when I look around, I don't see museums in Europe about colonialism. We decide to take seriously certain forms of suffering, which I think is good, right? But other type of suffering, we don't take that seriously. And therefore, when certain people try to engage with the Shoah, the Holocaust, and the suffering of Jewish people, which is real, they do it on the expense of other people. And that is, at the end of the day, very, very much sums up certain elements of what we see in Palestine and the settler colonialism, that essentially white Christians massacred Jews and then said the Palestinians have to pay the price by kind of finding this type of Zionist solution. And in doing so, it actually reproduces colonial logics and these hierarchies of who's considered human and who isn't. And I think, you just have to really look a bit into the context to really see who are the real people without the privileges, who are the people who are being suffering, and who are the ones with the power. And I use this also to reflect sometimes on myself. You can be both a victim and an oppressor. In certain contexts, I am an oppressor, right? In Palestine, I'm a man, a male, and therefore I fit into structures that oppress women, right? That obviously doesn't mean I can't also be a victim when I'm engaging with the Israeli sort of colonialism. But it's we can be both victims and oppressors, but in this context, it's very clear who are the ones being annihilated from the earth.
There is an essentialism of Palestinian suffering that people have, and they treat Palestinian suffering and only as victims and not as humans. And in that way, they're dealing with us as products, and they're the consumers, and they should come and save us. And this book is not asking for your help. It's asking you to join the olive grove, the olive picking with us, to join the process of resistance and decolonization. And a lot of times, that kind of gaze on us as only as victims, they need to narrate for us what we want. They need to narrate our experience. And there's a tricky balance here where you need to treat us as humans. Yes, we suffer genocide, we suffer settler colonialism, but we have the power to free ourselves. And I don't know if you noticed with Viva Palestina, the songs and the mood changed at the end. When Aramallah, that's a joyous song. That's a song that is happy. We sing it with a smile. You saw how we started clapping and moving. The beat started to change. That is not a victim always. That is someone who's rejoicing. That is someone who is human. And I'm going to touch on another aspect where I think people in that victimhood and angle is the what we call sumud washing. We use sumud. Sumud is real. Our resilience is real. Our resilience is strong. We saw resilience tonight. But when there's narration that Palestinians are so resilient, they can endure everything, it makes Palestinians always as these superhumans that can endure everything. But we are also broken people, and we can break and be in depression and desperate people, but at the same time exhibit extreme forms of resilience. And that way we're trying to create a collective, that humanity I think is important so that we create a collective movement and not an essentialism of the Palestinian cause.
The children question. What to say to your children? That's not for me to say. That's for you to work out what you need to, how to engage with your children on this issue. We can do it in community, obviously, but I need to focus on the children in Palestine. Perhaps we can, engage together, but really the work is on you to do when it comes to the work here in the US. We can engage with you, we can, bounce ideas, but the hard thinking is something that I think the activists here and the communities here need to do.
But I can share that if you're engaging with theology and faith in the book is part of the olive harvest. So when we pick olives, we pick olives as families. That's what we should be engaging. When we're engaging with land, it's always collectively with people. Right now, with the book and within certain universities, that is not accessible for children. The book is not accessible for children. But the book and the products that we produce should fit in a movement that reflects a movement that is accessible for kids. So the book needs to be a part of the resistance and should be relevant to the resistance, not an isolated academic recognized thing. The book should be like a part of the leaves of the living olive tree, where you have maybe different leaves doing different things, the roots doing different work, the stalk doing different things. But our theology, our products that we use, should be all synergized into one living being, which to be like a tree. And that's why not only children, but grandparents and others can be engaged into the movement.
I would take 2 more questions before we transition to closing the event.
Hear me? Are you aware of any? You lost me. Okay, here we go. Are you aware of any that we can attend and engage with logical liberation? Many churches here don't really engage that way, and so I'm just curious if you know any resources that we can engage toward that.
Thank you. Any other questions? One more question.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about supersessionism, basically. I think in my church, so I'm Episcopalian, I'm at the other seminary across down the street, where my husband's a student. And one thing that people get, I think that progressive Christians can kind of get caught up on, or maybe misled on, is this idea that, of course, supersessionism, as in Christians replace Jews, we reject that. But I think that it, unfortunately, it gets expanded to be that any acknowledgement that that basically Christ fulfilled the covenant at all is read as supersessionism by Christians. And that's something I really struggle with. I heard recently Anton Dieck and Munter Isaac talk about this, which was great. But I just wanted to know if you guys had any other thoughts about that question specifically. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. I know they have great answers.
Just want to acknowledge that the mic is distracting, right? Threw me off in the beginning. Hope what was communicated was clear. Again, we're here with FASNA, Friends of Sabil North America. This book, they are a part of this book, not only of the book tour, of the book. And they have worked years with Sabil, which is the Palestinian Liberation Center in Palestine. And they're accountable to them, so they have a lot of access to networks, churches, actions, movements, resources that can help you direct and act in a way that is ethical and with community, not only just you and with a few people here, but actually be a part of a larger movement of Christians that work for a free Palestine. And there's also the group Christians for a Free Palestine. So there's many things, many movements, many things that are going out there. Talk to Adi, who can, and also the brochure has quite a lot of areas that can point to you and direct you in that area. And they also do delegations to Palestine. So a lot of people have been transformed when coming to Palestine and realizing, oh snap, I'm a settler in the North American context. And then create that collective movement for liberation. And we need to do better. We need to be more visible. We need to know who are the actors, where we can join, what can we do, how we can organize, and bring farmers and poets and music and food into that movement for action.
3 points about supersessionism. The first one, when I engage with Christians and theologians in Europe and North America, they tend to be very obsessed in I think, an objectifying way with Jews. You either have the fundamentalists, evangelical Christian Zionists, who sort of, are really anti-Semitic in their theology and kind of objectify the Jews, or in some cases, that are completely dehumanize who Jews are. And on the other hand, you have progressive Christians who are part of this sort of post-Holocaust theology, who also are objectifying Jews and sort of putting them on a pedestal. Both are dehumanizing the Jews. And I think that North American and European Christians have to get out of that sort of dehumanizing approach towards Jews. Jews are humans, just like any other group. And my second point, the term supersessionism comes from debates amongst Christians about Palestine. And there's an article by Michael Azar from Scranton University in Pennsylvania, who traces the term. And he shows how essentially Christian Zionists have used that term in order to shut down any person who has legitimate criticism of the settler colonial project. So straight away, if you you say something critical, no, you're a supersessionist, which really they're trying to say you're anti-Semitic, so you should be quiet. The third point, supersessionism, according to some of these people, is this idea of sort of replacing. And I think that supersessionism is, you could say, is a much broader problem within Western Christianity. How many groups of people have Western Christians replaced? And you can think again about your own context here. And perhaps this is a continued thing when gentrification happens, when indigenous communities are still rejected and denied from their land, this idea that white Christians are better than others, right? This supersessionism has to be, if people want to bring it up, in conversation with colonialism and capitalism. And any way to not do that is not genuine. And it sort of looks at, after the Holocaust, it simply makes Jews more white, and therefore they take their suffering and real anti-Semitism as a problem and reject everyone else. And finally, I will sort of wrap all of this up, that it's fine to say that Christ fulfilled the promises without having to hate someone else. It's not it's not complicated, and I don't think the average Christian contemplates whether he's a supersessionist or not, or how do they interpret Romans 9 and 11, and therefore I should hate or not hate a Jewish person or a Muslim person.
Within these debates about supersessionism, I bet you many people in this room don't even know what that word is and what is the debate. And it's important to understand that we're not too caught up in that debate. I don't need to waste so much energy in disproving something, because a good tree produces good fruit. A bad tree doesn't. If I want to look at what Western Christianity has produced in terms of its good fruit, we look at Gaza and we say, okay, that theology is wrong. So we need to also be careful the amount of energy and resources we look into the debate, because that debate can be, it's a very specific debate. For not saying it's not important, but sometimes I say to myself, I don't really need to study theology to understand that Christian Zionism is a problem.
Okay, friends, I want to take time to thank Sam and John for being here with us, for your schedule, and for Addie as well, and Fazna. For Chaplain Usama, who everything would have fallen apart because I have ADD. So thank you so much for all of your organization, and for Sean and Angelica and lifelong learning. But we are indebted to you with so much gratitude for being with us, for teaching us, for taking the time and the emotional energy to teach us. We are grateful. And so I ask that we give them a round of applause, our gratitude.